quiet harbor town of Rockport, Massachusetts, once brimming with laughter and life, held a wound that had never healed. In the summer of 1985, two young sisters, Leah and Daisy Mercer, vanished without a trace while playing with their beloved red radio flyer Wagon. That day, etched into every heartbeat of their mother, Maureen Mercer, marked the end of innocence. The police scoured every inch of the town, the coastline, the forests, desperation painted across their faces. But as the sun set each evening, hope dimmed. The girls had seemingly disappeared into nothingness, swallowed by the same sea that had nurtured generations before them. Now, 15 years later, the same sea delivered a cruel, unexpected answer. The morning light filtered through the worn curtains of Maureen's small kitchen, casting golden rays across the chipped floorboards and the sink where she stood, absent-mindedly washing a single coffee mug again and again. Her home, once filled with giggles and muddy footprints, had become a shrine of silence. At 46, Maureen looked older than her years. Grief had etched fine lines along her face, and every sound, every knock at the door, held the potential to crack her world wide open. This morning that knock came. Startled, Maureen froze mid-motor, her breath caught in her chest. Through the smudged kitchen window, she saw a police cruiser parked in her driveway. Her hands trembled as she dried them on a dish towel, the fabric damp and worn from years of use, then walked with leaden steps to the door. Two officers stood outside. One of them, Officer Brennan, familiar from around town, removed his cap. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, his voice low and steady, "we need you to come with us to Granite Cove Harbor. There's been a development in your daughter's case." The word struck like lightning in her chest. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. "What kind of development?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. The second officer glanced at Brennan before answering. "A fisherman pulled something from the water this morning. We believe it may be linked to Leah and Daisy." Her daughter's name, spoken aloud after so long, hit her like broken glass. Without another word, Maureen reached for her coat by the door. She didn't bother changing out of her faded house dress and cardigan. Her body moved on instinct, her heart pounding a rhythm of dread. As she climbed into the back of the cruiser, the world outside the window blurred. Familiar streets and storefronts passing in a haze of memory and fear. The drive to Granite Cove Harbor took 10 minutes, but to Maureen it felt like both a lifetime and a blink. When they arrived, the air at the harbor was dense with tension. Police cruisers, forensics units, and murmuring onlookers cluttered the docks. The briny wind from the Atlantic tugged at her hair, carrying with it the weight of 1,000 forgotten moments. At the edge of the water stood Detective James Morrison. His gray hair was tousled by the sea breeze, but his eyes still held the weary kindness she remembered from those first awful weeks so many years ago. Next to him stood a weathered fisherman, his boots wet from the ocean and his hands shoved deep into the pockets of a thick cable-knit sweater. Between them, resting on a blue tarp, was an object so haunting it stole the breath from Maureen's lungs. The red radio flyer Wagon. Time had not been kind to it. One wheel gone, the metal frame corroded and encrusted with barnacles, but she knew it instantly. A mother always knows. Her knees buckled. Morrison reached out, steadying her with a firm but gentle hand. "This is Tommy Caldwell," he said softly. "He found it this morning." Tommy looked uncomfortable beneath the weight of so many eyes. His face was lined from years on the water, but his eyes were gentle behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ma'am," he said, his thick Massachusetts accent like an old song. "I was casting my nets farther out than usual. Fish been harder to come by with the waters warming. I ended up near Devil's Drop. That's when I pulled it up. At first it was just a mess of junk and seaweed. Then I saw the wagon. I remembered it from the news, from all the photos back then. Soon as I recognized it, I called the police." "Devil's Drop?" Maureen echoed, her voice shaking. "But no one fishes there. It's..." Too dangerous, Tommy finished for her. Most of us avoid it, jagged rocks, wild currents. Lost a trawler there back in '78. The Mary Catherine. 3 men nearly drowned. Call it superstition if you want, but some places out there, the sea keeps to herself. She stepped forward, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear. Did you find anything else? Her voice cracked like brittle glass. Detective Morrison's expression darkened. Not yet. We've sent a dive team down. They'll search the area thoroughly. If there's anything else, anything at all, we'll find it. Morin crouched beside the wagon, reaching out but stopping just short of touching it. Her fingertips trembled above the rusted frame. Despite the damage, she could still see it. The small, distinct scratch along one side where Daisy had scraped it against the garage door. And there, nearly invisible under layers of salt and decay, faint flecks of purple shimmered in the sunlight. Leia's nail polish. She had insisted on redecorating the wagon herself, just days before they disappeared. The memories hit her like a storm. That summer afternoon, the laughter echoing down the driveway, the squeak of the wagon wheels, and then silence. Now, in the face of this ghost from the past, Morin's grief found a new edge, sharp, cold, undeniable. And the ocean, it seemed, was finally beginning to speak. They disappeared, Morin whispered, her voice quivering like a breath caught in the throat of time. Her fingers traced the faint scratch along the rusted wagon's side. This was theirs. Leia tried to paint over it. Purple. She used my nail polish. She always wanted to make things prettier, even the broken bits. Detective Morrison gave a solemn nod, jotting into his notebook with methodical care. We'll need to document all this, Mrs. Mercer, and go over the files again. This changes everything. This isn't just a missing persons case anymore. Someone with a boat took them out that far. This is now a criminal investigation. Potential abduction. Tommy Caldwell, standing quietly nearby, shifted his weight uncomfortably. What about me, detective? We've got your statement, Mr. Caldwell. Just need your signature and contact info. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. As Tommy sighed, Maureen turned to him, her eyes full of earnest gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for not just tossing it back into the sea, for remembering. The fisherman's face softened with something ancient and kind. I've got grandkids of my own, ma'am. You don't forget that kind of pain. He handed over the paperwork, then added, I'll be at home or at the boathouse all day. Police have the address if you need me. Back in the patrol car as they drove toward the station, the familiar town blurred past again, but this time it wasn't memory's fog. It was transformation. For 15 years, Morin had existed in suspended animation. That limbo of not knowing was agonizing, but somehow bearable. Now that cruel peace was cracking open, revealing something far worse beneath, the possibility of truth. At the station, Morrison led her into his office, unchanged since 1985. The same worn carpet, the same corner ceiling stain. The only new addition was a clunky beige computer humming quietly in the corner. That detail, small as it was, stabbed her with the realization of time lost. 15 years frozen, while the world continued evolving without her. Let's go over this again, Morrison said gently, pulling the thick case file from a drawer. The edges were curled, the pages soft from overuse. August 12, 1985. Your daughters, Leia and Daisy, age 8, were playing outside with their radio flyer wagon. Morin nodded slowly. The ritual of repeating the timeline was both an old wound and a lifeline. The park was just around the corner. We didn't have a backyard, but it felt safe. Rockport felt safe. They were expected home by 5:30 p.m. Yes, when they didn't show, I looked. The park, then the fish market. I asked everyone. Nothing. Not one sighting. We interviewed every neighbor, checked gas stations, harbor logs. No one saw a thing. It never made sense, Morin said, the old frustration rising like bile. This wasn't some high-crime area. Rockport had one of the lowest crime rates in the state. No trafficking, no predators. We didn't have that. Now we know whoever did this had access to a boat, Morrison said grimly. That narrows things. We'll re-interview anyone from the harbor who had a vessel in 1985. Someone out there knows something. I want to see Tommy again, Morin said, the urgency in her voice surprising even herself. To thank him. Morrison handed her a slip of paper with an address scribbled on it. He's local. You can drop by. Also, do you have a cell phone? She shook her head. Never needed one. He reached into a drawer and handed her an old Nokia. Take this. We're working this case again. I need to reach you. She took it, unfamiliar and heavy in her palm. Technology had raced forward while her life stayed paused in 1985. After signing evidence documentation and release forms, an officer offered to drive her home. She accepted. The exhaustion hit her suddenly, like a wave crashing into the walls she'd built around her heart. Yet her grip tightened on the phone and Tommy's address. Two anchors in a sea of grief. She paused on her doorstep, staring at the street where her daughters once played, then went inside, changed her clothes, and left again. This time, she was headed toward something. Answers, perhaps, or more heartbreak. Tommy's property sat at the edge of the water, away from the bustle of the harbor. A 2-story house, weathered by sea air, stood beside a sagging boathouse. Tommy was outside, power washing grime off its gray shingles. When he saw her, he shut the machine off and raised a hand. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Please," she said, stepping out of the car. "Call me Morin. I wanted to thank you, away from the sirens, the chaos." He motioned toward 2 faded lawn chairs. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Water?" "No, thank you," she said, sitting down beside him. "I won't stay long." They sat in silence for a moment. Seagulls cried overhead, and the distant hum of boat engines buzzed like a memory. "I haven't come down here in years," she finally said. "Since the girls disappeared. I couldn't bear it." "I can't imagine how hard that must have been," Tommy said, his voice low with understanding. "How has the fishing community changed?" she asked, turning toward him. "Lots changed," he said, settling into his chair. "Many of the old-timers are gone, retired or passed. Younger folks, they're not sticking around. They head to Boston, get office jobs. Can't blame them. Fishing's tough work." Morin's tone sharpened. "And whoever took my girls to Devil's Drop, they had to know how to navigate those waters." Tommy nodded, his face shadowed. "I've been thinking the same. Back then, there were maybe 70 boats here. Now, maybe 30, 35. Whoever did this, they weren't some outsider. They knew Devil's Drop. They knew it's a place no one would ever look." Their conversation drifted. At one point she asked, "Did you ever come by my stall, Mercer's Fresh Catch?" "Of course." Tommy smiled faintly. "Best spot in the market, always a crowd." "What happened to it after?" He paused, thinking. "Sat empty a while. Then Frank Ditt took it over." Morin's brow furrowed. "But Frank had his own stall, I remember. His business was barely holding on. I heard he shut down for a bit, after what happened to your girls. But when he came back, he took your corner. Business turned around." "That stall," Morin murmured. "It was a lucky one." Tommy nodded. "Maybe you should stop by, catch up with some old faces." She smiled, though something gnawed at her now, a thought she couldn't quite name. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. "Let me give you something for your trouble," she said quietly, "for finding the wagon, for giving me something real." "Absolutely not," Tommy said firmly, raising both hands like a wall between them. "I didn't pull that wagon up out of the water for a reward." "Please," Morin insisted, her voice soft but resolute. She reached into her wallet and pulled out several crisp bills, pressing them toward him. "This is nothing compared to what you've done. You gave me something I haven't had in 15 years. Hope." But Tommy was already on his feet, his stance immovable. "Ma'am, Morin, I've got grandkids. If something like that ever happened to them, I'd want someone to do the same. You keep your money." "I won't take it." Seeing that she wouldn't win this argument, Morin reluctantly tucked the bills away. But she wasn't finished. From her purse, she pulled out a small notepad and scribbled carefully in her neat script, her name, her home number, her address. She tore the page out and handed it to him. "If you ever need anything at all, you call me," she said, her eyes locking with his, the weight of her sincerity plain. Tommy accepted the note, folding it with care and sliding it into the pocket over his heart. "I appreciate that." "I should let you get back to your work," Morin said, standing. Tommy walked her back to her car, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. Just before she opened the door, he paused. "You take care now," he said quietly. "And Morin, I hope they find the answers you deserve. 15 years is too long to wonder." As she drove away, Morin glanced in the rearview mirror. Tommy was still standing there, the paper with her information clutched in one hand. In that moment, surrounded by her grief, she was reminded of something she hadn't felt in years. Kindness. And though small, it filled a crack in her heart just wide enough to let the light in. The Rockport Fish Market loomed 3 blocks from the harbor, and its familiar scent of salt and fish hit her before she even turned the corner. For 15 years, Morin had gone out of her way, 20 minutes out of her way, to shop in Gloucester instead. The fish there was bland, plastic-wrapped and soulless, but it was free of whispered pity and glances that lingered just too long. Now, she stood at the market's threshold, frozen. The layout inside hadn't changed much. Same sloped concrete floors, same chalkboard signs, same rows of ice-covered display cases. But the faces were new. The energy had shifted. The old community she remembered had been replaced by younger, sharper strangers. And then there it was. Her old stall. Or rather, what had once been hers. Frank Ditt's name now hung on a polished, professional-looking sign, replacing the hand-painted one she and Daisy had decorated in marker all those years ago. His fish were immaculate, silver and pink, fresh on mounds of ice. But Frank was nowhere in sight. A young man stood behind the counter instead, finishing up a customer's order. "Excuse me," Morin asked gently when he was free. "I'm looking for Frank Ditt." The boy glanced up. "Mr. Ditt's at the auction house. Should be wrapping up about now." "Auction house?" 3 blocks down, big gray building, can't miss it." She thanked him and walked quickly down the familiar street, her pulse quickening with each step. The auction house was just as she remembered. Weathered, massive, a relic of Rockport's long fishing history. As she approached, she slowed. The place was quiet, the morning rush long over. Just as she reached for the front door, voices stopped her. "I told you I'd have your cash by the end of the week," came Frank's voice, gruffer now but unmistakable. "That wasn't the deal," a second man replied, voice edged with tension. "Late is late." "This is fisherman business," Frank barked back. "We made an agreement. Don't lose your nerve now." The argument moved around the corner. Morin edged closer, heart thumping, and peeked around the side of the building. Frank and another man, broad-shouldered, in a stained apron, stood beside a battered pickup truck. The aproned man reached through the open window and pulled out a key, letting it dangle in the sunlight. Frank snatched it hard. "You'll get your money," he growled. The man said nothing, just climbed into his truck and drove away, tires grinding over gravel. Frank shoved the key in his pocket and walked off in the direction of the market. Morin stayed where she was, shaken but composed. She didn't know what that was about, and maybe it had nothing to do with her. Still, something about the interaction unsettled her. Back inside the market, Frank was behind his stall again, barking orders at the young employee. When he saw her, he froze for just a second, then sneered. "Well, well," he muttered, voice raspy from years of salt air and cigarettes. "Look who finally shows her face. People were starting to think you were dead." The words struck deep, but Morin didn't flinch. She knew Frank. He'd always been a rough cut of stone, never polished, never soft. "Hello, Frank," she said evenly. "I heard you took over my old stall." "Someone had to," he replied, not meeting her eyes as he rearranged red snapper on ice. "I'm here because of what happened this morning," she said, watching his hands still. "The police found my daughter's wagon. A fisherman pulled it from the sea." Frank looked up slowly, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Who found it?" "Tommy Caldwell." Frank scoffed, a joyless sound. "Figures. Tommy always had luck. Hope he doesn't use it to try opening a stall. Market's full enough." "I'm glad your business is doing well," she said gently. "You worked hard for it. You deserve it." Frank said nothing for a long moment. Then he reached under the counter and thumped a white styrofoam box on top. "It's inside, fresh fish, shrimp, squid, packed in ice." "Frank, no," Morin said, shaking her head. "There's no need." "Take it," he cut her off. "I remember when you bought my whole stock. Thought I was some sad old fool. Maybe I was. But now we're even. Take it or leave it. I don't owe anyone anything. That's the way the world works." His tone was harsh, but something in his eyes flickered. Regret, perhaps. Or memory. Morin stared at the box, her throat tight. The weight of the past was heavy in her hands, but in this strange, unexpected gesture of closure, she saw something else. The possibility that even wounds 15 years deep could still scab over, if only a little. Morin stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether Frank's gesture was a long overdue act of kindness or a display meant to assert control. Yet, despite the years of bitterness and absence, she chose to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, just maybe, this was his way of trying to make peace. The container was heavier than she expected as she lifted it from the counter. "Thank you, Frank," she said quietly. He merely waved a hand, already turning back to his display, as if her gratitude was more awkward than appreciated. The drive home was quiet, the box of seafood resting on the passenger seat beside her like a silent guest. It felt both comforting and vaguely unsettling. When she arrived home, she carried it to the back kitchen, the room that had once been the heart of her small fish business, now long abandoned. Dust shimmered in the beams of late afternoon sun piercing through the dirty windows. She opened the old chest freezer, already suspecting what she'd find. The interior was musty, warm, and dead. The motor hadn't hummed in years. Her fridge's freezer was far too small for the bounty Frank had given her. Sighing, Morin repacked the box, returned it to her car, and headed back toward the harbor, planning to pay the cutting house to clean and store the seafood. As she pulled into the parking lot, the harbor was in flux, boats coming and going, men finishing their shifts, others preparing for night runs. But one figure stood out. Tommy Caldwell. He was walking quickly across the lot, shoulders tight, movements jerky. In one hand, at arm's length, he carried a black garbage bag. Morin's instincts kicked in. Something was wrong. "Tommy!" she called out, jogging to catch up. The smell hit her first. Trot, decay, and something worse that clung to the air like a sickness. "What's going on?" Tommy turned, his face flushed with frustration. "Someone tossed this into my boathouse. Just now. I was inside organizing nets, heard something slam the outer wall. When I came out, this was there." Morin's gut twisted. "Did you see who it was?" "Caught a glimpse," he said tightly. "Bald guy. That's all. He was already walking away. Might have had his car running. By the time I reached the lot, he was gone." "What kind of car?" He hesitated, trying to recall. Late 90s Ford F-150. Dark blue or black. Half the guys in town drive those. But there was something near the plate, a sticker. Didn't get a good look. But if I see it again, I'll know. His eyes darkened. "And if I do, I'll handle it." Before she could respond, he noticed the styrofoam box in her hands. "What's that?" "Frank gave it to me," she said. "It's seafood. Fresh. Too much for me, honestly. My freezer's useless. I was going to store it here for the week." She hesitated, then added quietly, "You should take some. There's no one else for me to share it with." Tommy's expression softened. "You're kind, Morin. Let me ditch this filth first, then I'll come find you." She watched him head toward the dumpsters, then pushed open the cutting house doors. The scent of ice, brine, and memory hit her like a wave. Behind the counter stood Mark Patterson. His hair had grayed, but the warmth in his smile hadn't faded a bit. "Morden Mercer," he said, his voice full of genuine surprise. "Been too long?" "It has," she admitted. "I haven't been able to come around much." She set the box on the counter. "Frank gave me this. I need it cleaned and stored. What'll it cost for a week?" Mark didn't hesitate. "No charge. Least I can do." "Mark, please." Her tone was soft but firm. "I've had enough charity for one day. Let me pay." After a moment, he relented, naming a fair price. As she reached into her purse, the kitchen door swung open, and with it came a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. A man stepped out, lifting the box she'd brought. Morin froze. It was him. The man in the apron from the auction house, the one who gave Frank the key. She tried to keep her tone casual. "Mark? Who's that?" "Jesse Vaughn," he replied. "Works the floor." "Something wrong?" She forced a smile. "No, just thought I recognized him. Saw him this morning talking to Frank." Mark's expression shifted, just slightly. Jesse rarely works with Frank. Honestly, I don't like dealing with the man. Frank's difficult." He turned toward the kitchen. "I should go talk to." "No," Morin said quickly. "It's nothing, really." Mark paused, then nodded. "All right, I'll have your fish ready by next week." She thanked him, left the cutting house, and walked slowly to her car. Her feet felt heavy, her heart even more so. Today had unraveled her. Tommy's kindness, Frank's strange offering, Jesse's odd presence. Her instincts screamed that these events weren't random. She just wanted to go home, to sit, to breathe. As she drove down Harbor Road, she passed the market again. Frank's stall was busy. Customers lined up, the young worker moving swiftly, but Frank was gone. She turned up the radio. Dreams by Fleetwood Mac was playing. For a fleeting second, it felt like an ordinary day. A simple drive home. A moment suspended in time. Until the car behind her accelerated aggressively. In her rear view, she watched it swerve, pull onto the shoulder, and brake hard ahead. The door flew open. A man jumped out, waving his arms frantically. Her hands gripped the wheel. She braked, slowed, prepared to pass. Then she saw his face. "Jesse." She reversed gently, pulled over, and got out. Jesse jogged toward her, panic etched deep into his face. "I need to talk to you, now," he said breathlessly. "We're in the middle of the road," she replied. eyes flicking to the cars passing. "Come to my house." "No," his voice cracked. "Now. I don't have time." Something in his tone, raw, terrified, made her stop. "What is it?" "Frank came to see me this morning," Jesse said, his hands shaking. "He's been coming around for weeks. This time was different." He looked panicked, desperate. "Probably," she asked, her voice tightening. "He wanted to rent my fishery house, the whole thing. Said he was getting a big shipment. I told him no. He kept pushing. Then today he offered money. So much money. And he wanted to rent my boat, too. And the boathouse." Morin's blood turned cold. "You boat?" Said he needed to tie up loose ends. I asked what he meant, and then he showed me a picture. Jesse's voice broke. It was of twins. Grown up now, but they looked like your daughters. I recognized the faces from the flyers. Moran's world tilted. He told me if I went to the police, he'd kill them and come for me and Mark. But if I let him use the boat, he'd disappear. "Jesse," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you go to the police?" "I was scared," he admitted, ashamed. "The money. I thought I could help my business. Help Mark. I thought if I got rid of the boat after, it would be over. But I was wrong. I see that now." She stepped closer, her voice urgent. "If there's even a chance, if one of my daughters is alive, you have to come with me. Right now. To the police. Show me your boathouse. We need to act. Before it's too late." Okay, Jesse stammered, nearly hyperventilating. "I'm sorry. I should have told someone sooner. I was stupid. Your apology only matters if we're not too late," Morin snapped, her voice cold with urgency. Her fingers shook as she reached into her purse and retrieved the small Nokia phone. Once just an odd reminder of the past, now a lifeline. She punched in the number Morrison had given her that morning, her fingers clumsy and slick with fear. "This is Morin Mercer," she said breathlessly when the dispatcher picked up. "I need to speak with Detective Morrison. It's about my daughter. It's urgent." Within moments, Morrison was on the line. Morin forced herself to slow her breath, relaying everything Jesse had just told her. Her voice trembled, but every word was clear. Jesse stood beside her, pale and shaking, and provided the boathouse address when prompted. "We'll send a unit," Morrison said firmly. "Both of you. Head to the station now. Do not engage. No sirens, no uniforms. We need stealth until we understand what we're dealing with." "Please," Morin whispered, her voice breaking. "If you alert Frank, he'll kill her." "We hear you, Mrs. Mercer," Morrison replied. "We're formulating a plan. Just get to the station." She ended the call and turned to Jesse, his face drawn tight with fear. "Get in the car," she ordered, "and pray we're not too late." Jesse parked his vehicle in the lot behind a nearby bait shop, then climbed into Morin's Honda. His hands were trembling so violently he could barely buckle his seatbelt. "There's no way I can just sit at the station," Morin said, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. "You said he might be there right now. Take me to your boathouse. We'll find a place nearby. Watch from a distance." "I know a spot," Jesse said, his voice hoarse. "There's a bluff that overlooks it. We won't be seen." They drove in silence, tension pressing in from all sides. The sky was darkening, casting long shadows as they wound through back roads until they reached a small rise above the harbor. Below them, Jesse's boathouse stood still and quiet. His boat was docked inside, its shape visible through the water entrance. There was no sign of Frank. No police yet. "Is he late?" Jesse whispered. "Or already done?" "Did he tell you what time?" Morin asked, barely able to voice the question. "No," just that he needed it for 3 days. Starting today? Morin's grip tightened on the phone. She called Morrison again. We're in position. Boathouse appears empty. No movement, no Frank. Copy, Morrison said. We're deploying plainclothes officers to observe and prepare. Stay hidden. Do not move in. Minutes passed like hours. Then, like ghosts, unmarked cars began appearing around the edges of the scene. Officers took positions with silent coordination. No lights, no noise, just quiet professionals closing in. Then she saw it. The dark blue Ford F-150 creeping along the access road. The fading sun caught a sticker on the rear, a faded Marine Corps emblem. The driver's head, unmistakably bald, glinted in the light. That's him, Morn whispered. That's Frank's truck, the one Tommy described. Her heart pounded as she started the engine and followed at a cautious distance. Jesse kept the police on the line. He's heading north. Wait, no, not the boathouse. He's turning. He's heading to my fishery house. Your fishery house? Morrison asked, voice sharp. It's newer, just opened last year, Jesse replied. He must have changed the plan. It's at the old Brennan fishery site. He's got the keys, my whole keyring. Do not engage, Morrison ordered. If he has a weapon or a hostage, confronting him could be deadly. We need a tactical advantage. No, Morin said, her voice steel. We'll find a vantage point. I need to see her. Morrison started to protest, but Morin had already veered off the main road onto a secluded service path, climbing toward a hill overlooking the fishery house. They parked behind a cluster of pines. From this height, they could see everything. Frank's truck pulled into the lot below. He stepped out, scanned the area, then walked to the passenger's side and pulled out a limp figure. Morin's breath caught. Her vision tunneled. The world blurred. Even after 15 years, she knew. The curve of the face, the way the hair fell, it was her daughter. Frank carried the young woman inside, then returned to his truck, retrieving a coil of rope and a toolbox. Off, gone, Jesse whispered. Shh, Morin hissed, her hands trembling violently. Where was the other girl? Were they both alive? Down below, police moved like shadows in the failing light, surrounding the building with quiet precision. Then came the moment. Multiple teams breached the building from all sides. Shouts rang out, commands, confusion. Frank's voice roared in protest, but no gunfire. Moments later, he was led out in handcuffs, his head bowed, defeated. Morin's phone rang. We got him, Morrison said. She's alive, but confused. We need you here now. Morin didn't wait. She ran. Down the slope, toward the building, toward her daughter. Police let them through. Inside, the cold air of the fishery house hummed around them, heavy with the scent of ice and something darker. Frank's toolbox sat open on a steel table next to ropes, duct tape, a gun, and on a slab in the center of the room. One of them, the young woman, stirred, eyes fluttering as an officer gently knelt beside her. You're safe, he said softly. It's over. The girl blinked, disoriented. Her gaze drifted over the officers, the ceiling, and finally to Morin. There was no recognition. Who are you? She whispered. Why are police here? Where's Frank? Morin knelt beside her, tears spilling freely. Her voice trembled. I'm your mother. You were taken. Jesse, he helped us find you. The police. Frank's been arrested. The girl shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. My mother's dead, she said quietly. And Morin's heart broke again, not from doubt, but from knowing what trauma can do, from understanding how deeply Frank had erased her. But he hadn't won. Not yet. Frank told me, Laya whispered, her voice trembling. He said she died. No, sweetheart, Morin said softly, her voice cracking with the weight of truth. I'm alive. I've been looking for you every single day for 15 years. Leia's eyes searched her mother's face, the lines of time unfamiliar, and yet something in the gaze, the voice, it broke through the haze. You lied to us, Leia whispered. Her voice was faint but laced with realization. Frank lied about everything, and he killed her. Frank killed Daisy. The name struck Morin like a hammer to the chest. Her breath left her body. She knew then, without question. This was Leia, her younger twin, and Daisy. God. Oh, Leia, Morin sobbed, pulling her daughter into a trembling embrace. My girl, my heart. You're really my mom? Leia asked, her voice tinged with wonder. You look older. I almost didn't recognize you. Morin laughed through her tears. That's what 15 years of searching for you and missing you does to a person. Leia leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. Daisy's been gone for a long time, she said, her voice breaking. She tried to continue, but the words tangled in pain and memory. It's okay, Morin whispered, smoothing Leia's hair. No need to explain. We have time now. What matters is that you're here. You're alive. And Frank's arrested? Leia said, glancing at Jesse, who stood nearby looking broken and uncertain. You helped find me? She asked. Jesse nodded, tears forming in his eyes. We all saved each other. I couldn't live with staying quiet, not after what I learned. I had to speak. Then Jesse's brow furrowed. Wait, do you smell that? He turned, motioning to a nearby officer, and they hurried toward the back room of the fishery house. A moment later, he returned, grim-faced. The incinerator's still running, he said quietly. Red hot. He was going to destroy evidence, maybe even her. I thought he was going to dump her at sea, Jesse added, his voice hollow. But maybe with the harbor crawling with police, he changed his plan. Leia gripped Morin tightly, crying openly now. As the paramedics arrived, they carefully separated mother from daughter to assess Leia's condition. And he gave me medicine, Leia told them, her voice low. More than usual. Cough syrup, but strong. He made me drink it. He wanted her sedated but conscious, the medic said grimly. You're safe now, miss. We're here to help. They worked methodically, documenting injuries, taking Leia's statement as gently as possible. Their faces betrayed nothing, but their careful compassion said everything. She'll need a full hospital exam, the lead paramedic told Morrison, but she's stable. Morrison turned to Morin. If you're both well enough, I'd like to take statements while the details are fresh. Then we'll get her to the hospital. Moran nodded, refusing to let go of Leia's hand. They rode in silence to the police station, Jesse following behind. Inside, the station buzzed with energy. Phones rang, doors opened and shut. Officers whispered urgent updates to each other. As they passed, Morin overheard a passing officer murmur, Frank's talking, but he's not telling everything. Her stomach clenched. She exchanged a glance with Jesse. He looked as if the floor might swallow him whole. Leia was led to a separate room with a female officer. Morin followed Morrison into a small interview room. Plain walls, no windows, a cold metal table. Let's start from the top, Morrison said, setting a digital recorder down. Tell me everything. And so she did. From the moment the wagon was found to Tommy, Frank's strange gift, the encounter at the cutting house, Jesse's roadside confession, every beat of the story spilled out in vivid, harrowing detail. Morrison took notes, face grim. When she finished, he opened a file just handed to him. His jaw tightened as he read. He's confessing, Morrison said finally, and I need to share it with you. But it will be hard to hear. Morin straightened. Tell me. Morrison read aloud. On August 12, 1985, Frank lured Leia and Daisy from the park with promises of vanilla slices and a fishing trip. He told them you'd given permission, that you'd be proud if they brought home a catch. Morin closed her eyes, gripping the table. The park was so close, just across the road. Drugged them to his house instead. Drugged them, wrapped them in a tarp with fishing gear, hid them in the cabin of his trawler. Morrison's tone darkened. He had connections, a network of fishermen up the coast. He lent the girls out, in exchange for silence. This continued during the initial investigation. Morin gasped, the bile rising in her throat. They all knew? When the case went cold, he moved them to his basement, gave them a pittance, fed them lies, said you and your husband died in a plane crash. No bodies recovered. Did they never try to run? Morrison hesitated. Daisy did, at 14. He caught her, slit her throat, then dismembered the body, processed it. Process it? She choked. What? What does that mean? Morrison's voice broke. He used fish processing acid, mixed her remains with the waste, then dumped it. The world spun. Morin clutched the table, sobbing so violently she thought her body might collapse under the weight. When she could speak, she asked the question that had haunted her soul. Why? Why would he do this? Morrison turned to a final page. Jealousy. You were successful. Your stall thrived. You were supplying restaurants in Boston. He lost contracts. Blamed you. No family, no kids. He saw you as the reason for his failure. Wanted to hurt me, Morin whispered. To destroy me. He did more than that, Morrison said. He destroyed everything. But he lost himself in the process. He'll die in prison. A sudden memory surfaced. Tommy, Morin said. Someone dumped rot in his boathouse. Frank must have done it. Same truck, same marine sticker. He even asked me. Tommy's name. Morrison made a note. We'll warn Tommy. Good thing we caught Frank when we did. And Jesse? Morin asked. He saved Leia's life. He'll face charges, Morrison said gently. But the DA will weigh everything. His confession, his role in saving her. The judge will likely go easy. He stood. You've been through enough for now. We'll take you both to the hospital. As they stepped into the corridor, Morin saw Jesse flanked by officers. Despite his pale face, he gave her a trembling smile. No matter what happens, he said softly, I can live with it now. I couldn't live with silence. Then she saw her, Leia, walking out of the interview room. Their eyes met across the hall. And then they ran. 15 years unraveled between them in an instant. They fell into each other's arms, Morin sobbing, Leia clinging to her like a lifeline. My baby, Morin whispered into her hair. My sweet girl. I thought I'd never see you again, Leia cried. He told us so many lies. The station around them blurred. For this one moment, nothing else mattered. A mother and daughter. Outside, a car waited to take them to the hospital. Morin turned once more to Jesse. Their eyes met. She nodded, a silent thank you he would never forget. And then she turned back to her daughter, taking her hand. In a world where monsters could hide behind weathered faces, where evil could reach into sunlit parks and snatch innocence away, there was still light. It burned in people like Tommy Caldwell, who remembered missing children. In Jesse Vaughn, who overcame terror to do the right thing. In Detective Morrison, who never gave up. But most of all, it burned in the bond between a mother and her daughter. Frank had stolen so much. Daisy, Leia's childhood, John's life, Morin's peace. But he had not destroyed that bond. As they stepped out of the police station into the cool evening air, Morin squeezed her daughter's hand. There was a long road ahead. Healing, grief, justice, learning to be family again. But they would walk it together. And sometimes, the truth doesn't surface with a confession, but with a rusted red wagon dragged from the deep by a fisherman who dared to look where others would not. An ordinary morning that became anything but.